Good morning. It's good to be here with you this morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt Churchill. I'm the camp director out at LaMoine Christian Service Camp. We're the 6th directors out there in the history of the camp, and it's a privilege and an honor to be able to serve out there. In March, my family, Sarah, my wife Sarah, and our 3 kids, Jada, Jairus, and Jack, and the 4th is on the way, all moved out to the camp, and we were out there after we had moved. We had great help from this church to get there, and my wife and I were standing on the back deck and just looked out, and it just felt like we were back home. It's great to be there once again. And I told Jack that I would say his name in the sermon, and so there it is, bud. So he was like all morning like, hey, Dad's going to say my name. So I know many of you have a long history with the camp, and our family is no different than yours. My father-in-law, Larry, served on the board at the camp back when Bob Carver was the director, and kind of when they transitioned from Bob to Larry Rosine. Larry and Becky, I believe, had their premarital counseling in the basement of the camp residence with Bob, and Larry's uncle built the house that sits out there today that we're living in. And so there's a long history for our family as well. I first became familiar with LaMoine back in 2006 when I was on camp teams. It's also when I met Mark. I was there for 2 weeks that summer. He was one of the deans, and let me tell you, he was the best dean for camp teams. It was like the last week of camp, and he was like, I'm not going to have you guys do anything. Like, you guys have been doing camp all summer long. He's like, just hang out with the kids. It was great. Broke my toe and everything when I was out there. It was awesome. I don't know if you remember that or not, Mark, but let us go to Dairy Queen and stuff. Like, we just left camp. It was great. But I was serving on camp teams that summer, and I was out there for 2 weeks. I was out there for a high teen earlier in the year, and then his week. And I'll tell you that my favorite camp that summer was LaMoine, and I'm not just saying that. Like, it really was. When I first stepped foot on the grounds of LaMoine, I knew that it was a special place. You know, first impressions are kind of funny to me a little bit. You know, sometimes they really matter to us, the way first impressions happen. You know, if you show up to a restaurant and the tables are dirty and maybe the server has stains on their clothes, there's flies going around, like most of us are going to be like, I don't know about this place, right? I don't know. Sometimes those are like the best burger joints, though, to me. But on the other side, if you show up to like a church and there's coffee and greeted by a nice warm smile, most likely you're going to return. First impressions matter to us, but sometimes I believe that they can be misleading. Have you ever met someone that you think is a pretty great person to begin with, only to find out that they're not so great? Or maybe you've met someone that at first you just didn't get along with, but after a while you became really good friends with them. I think back to, if you're married, to when you met your spouse for the first time. How did that go? I know some people here at this church will say they didn't like their spouse when they first met them, but here they are many years later, they're married. My wife and I, when we first met, we got different stories on that to begin with. And as we visited with people in the past, conversations always come up, well, how did you guys meet? I'm from Michigan, she's from, Carthage, Illinois. Like, how did you guys meet? And so we disagree. She claims that we met when I was on camp teams. I was out at LaMoine during that week that Mark was the dean, and so it's like the last week of summer camp. She had just graduated high school and was out there visiting. She wasn't a camper. She was out there visiting, and one of the faculty members knew that I was at Central. She was going to Central, thought, hey, you guys should meet. And so he taps me on my shoulder, as she would tell you, and I turn around, and back then I had long curly hair, and so I turn around and my hair kind of flows in the wind, kind of like Fabio, right? And my bright blue eyes, like, they catch hers, and she's just like amazed, right? She's just stunned. And I say, hey, and turn around and completely ignore her the rest of the time. That's how she says we met. I, on the other hand, believe we met because she dated my roommate in college. He didn't come back to school, they broke up, and I won. So, and it's interesting how we can remember things and encounter things a little bit differently. I want you to stop and think for a moment, though, for the first time that you met someone, the first time that you met Jesus, the first time that you realized that you needed a Savior for yourself. Maybe you grew up in the church and you heard about Jesus your whole life, but that time that you finally realized that you knew who he was. Or maybe you didn't grow up going to church, you didn't hear about him, that first time that you heard that message. How were you feeling? What emotions are you going through? I don't know if you know or not, but I did not grow up going to church my whole life. I didn't grow up in a Christian household. Both my parents are now believers. They're strong believers, but it wasn't always that way in our house. But one summer, a friend of mine invited me to go to summer camp with him, and I loved it. At the camp I went to in Michigan, there was a pond to go fishing, there was miniature golf, there was open gym, there were crafts. Every year there was like these softball competitions, and if you won the most points at the end of the with that and some other competitions, you won the most points at the end of the week, you had like a watermelon party, and it was like this prize thing to do. But there was all that, and there were girls. What more could I ask for as a junior high boy, right? It was great. Camp I went to is called Pleasant Valley Bible Camp, and it was in a small camp kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Well, one summer when I was in junior high, I remember sitting in a chapel service one evening. For chapel at Pleasant Valley, you were required to dress up. The girls had to wear either skirts or dresses. The guys had to wear dress pants and either a polo or a button-down shirt. Sometimes we would kind of raid our counselors' ties and we'd steal those and wear those as well. But during the chapel service that week, I remember sitting there with our cabins, because we had to sit with our cabins with our counselor, and as the sun would set, it was an open-air chapel with screens on it. The cool air would begin to kind of come in, and that evening I remember the speaker, who was a ventriloquist, just kind of giving the message that night. He would kind of get us with humor and then bring home this message that Jesus loved us. It wasn't the first time that I heard that message. I'd been going to camp a little bit and started going to church some as well. But it was the first time that I remember it making me stop and think. That night after the chapel service, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat outside the cabin with my counselor, and I just began asking him a million questions. And he told me more and more about Jesus and about his faith. And I loved that camp, and I loved that week, because that was the first time that I ever felt like I really belonged someplace. It was one of the first times that I could ever remember actually feeling like I was loved. See, that night, Romans 10 kind of became personal for me. In Romans 10, verse 9, beginning in verse 9, Paul writes, "If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. One believes with the heart, resulting in righteousness, and one confesses with the mouth, resulting in salvation. For the scripture says, everyone who believes on him will not be put to shame, since there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, because the same Lord of all richly blesses all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." And this is true for each and every person, no matter who you are or what you have done. If you call on the name of the Lord, you'll be saved. It's a truth. Romans continues on, and Paul writes, "How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them?" We don't just understand who Jesus is. We need others to lead us there, to teach us, and to grow. And how will we ever know that without being taught that? And that's what some of the things that we do at camp. And I would have known that if it were not for summer camp in my life. Since before graduating in Bible college and up until October of 2020, my career has been in youth ministry. And whether that be working in a church or working at the youth camp, I've mostly worked with youth. While working in youth ministry, I always try to build up a team of adults around me, because the truth is you can't do ministry alone, especially not youth ministry. You just need people around you. And so I'll try to train and equip those leaders with their various activities or exercises that we would do. But one of the things that I did one time is that I had adults take an index card, a 3x5 card, and write down on it 3 names of individuals that have influenced their walk. And I asked them to kind of reflect on them and how did those people impact their lives. I'd encourage you to do the same thing. When you're, maybe right now or tonight, when you're at home, write down 3 people and think about how they impacted your faith and helped you grow in that. See, then I would encourage my adults to go and do that for our students. To go and be the person that you needed for the next generation. For me, I had people like Randy and Barb Stevenson. Randy was the sheriff in town, and Barb kind of did various jobs, but they would spend time with myself and my 3 brothers. Randy encouraged me to learn how to play the guitar. And when I was kind of ready, he asked me to join the praise team. And that's where I learned how to lead worship. Barb suckered me into teaching junior high Sunday school one year, and after I graduated high school, but that experience led me to my calling in ministry, and eventually led me to Bible college. I had people like Cal and Beth Long. Both of them helped me in my walk and encouraged me in Bible college. Beth, the first Sunday I was at their church, I was in high school, Beth came up to me and said, "Hey, I heard that you sing and play guitar. Join our praise team." So she got me involved in church. Cal was the preacher, and he helped me grow in my knowledge of Scripture. He would meet with me occasionally as well. And each of them saw potential in this quiet junior high and high school student. But they understood what Paul said in Romans 10:14. How then can they call on him they have not believed in? And how can they believe without hearing about him? And how can they hear without a preacher? How can they hear without somebody telling them? See, we each have a role to play in the kingdom. If you and I do not take the faith that we have grown in, the faith that we have, and then turn around and share that same love and mercy that you and I have received with others, how will they ever believe? See, it isn't just the paid minister's job to fulfill Romans 10:14. We are all called to be ministers of reconciliation, as Paul writes in Corinthians. While I was in Bible college, several of my friends and I got together with one of our professors, and we created this organization, this group that we called Club 71. It was mostly made up of youth ministry majors, and was a time kind of dedicated for us to be mentored by our professor. We weren't just studying ministry, but most of us were actually doing ministry, working in a local church. But our theme verse for that was Psalm 71, verse 18. And as I've gotten older, I've realized even more the profound words of this verse, the single verse, and the importance that they carry. See, King David was writing this psalm, and he's getting towards the end of his life. And he writes in Psalm 71, verse 18, "Even when I am old and gray, God, do not abandon me, while I proclaim your power to another generation, your strength to all who come." And whether we realize it or not, we all play a role in passing on our faith, especially to the next generation. Whether that's someone in our own family, a kid sitting across the other side of the church, or one that lives down the street from you, our desire should be that of David's, to proclaim God's power to the generations that come behind us. And that, my friends, is why LaMoine exists. The LaMoine Christian Service Camp exists to challenge youth and adults to love and serve Christ. Everything we do is with that in mind, challenging youth and adults to love and serve Christ. For the past 65 years, LaMoine has partnered with churches just like Burnside to do that. In 1945, there was a man named Melvin Fiskus who was visiting Camp Point, Illinois. He was considering being the preacher at First Christian Church. And during a tour of the town, he came across this park. They took him to, it's called Bailey Park. It's still there today. And it was there that he said these words: "Wouldn't this be an ideal place to start a camp for young people?" 2 years later, he helped make that dream a reality. The summer of 1947, 63 children attended camp there. They were staying in tents, and they would walk to the church for meals. I recently met some of those first campers while visiting another church, and it was fun to hear their stories of Mr. Fiskus, as they called him, and to hear about the camp in its early days. But as the camp began to grow, they soon realized that multiple weeks would not be enough for them to continue having camp at Bailey Park and Camp Point. So in 1956, the churches met together and eventually decided to buy the 20 acres where LaMoine now sits for a whole $850 for 20 acres. I mean, you couldn't buy like a sliver of dirt for that right now, right? While talking through the plans, though, for the camp, men would gather each Monday to work at the camp. They cleared an area and they built a kitchen and dining hall. You know, we continue to meet on Monday nights 3 times a month for our area fellowship meetings. Churches also began to gather food in barrels. It's a tradition that each church continues to gather and donate food and supplies that we call Camp Barrel. But all that is to help make camp possible. In less than 6 months, the camp was established on 20 acres with a kitchen and dining hall and was ready for campers. And that first summer, there were 274 campers. During those discussions, they were discussing, should we dig a well? What should we do here to get water here? And one man stated, "We are about to build a camp that we intend to use for at least 150 years. Let's do it right and dig a deep well that will meet our needs for years to come." Now, we're not quite halfway to those 150 years, but the groundwork has been laid and is continuing to be built upon so that the ministry of LaMoine can continue for another 150 years. And so we're entering into our 65th year of ministry at LaMoine. You know, we're facing some challenges, just like they were back in 1956. You know, back in 2016, the camp was able to build all new cabins. Each cabin has its own bathroom with heat and air conditioning and a storm shelter, making the camp a safer place for campers and visitors. But with that, the camp incurred some debt. Your camp board has made a renewed commitment to pay that debt off, ensuring that LaMoine can be around for many years to come. When I first got on staff, we had $300,000 worth of debt. But because of the generosity of our people and our churches, just like Burnside, we have been able to pay off $117,000 to where we only owe $183,000, and money keeps coming in for that. And I can see that in the next year that's going to be paid off completely. I believe it. But I know that as a church, you have made a commitment to the camp, and you've helped alleviate some of that debt already, and I'm so thankful for that. Because LaMoine does not exist without our member churches. We can't do what we do without you. You know, and as the world came to a halt in 2020 and the uncertainty of guidelines and restrictions came, LaMoine has been without a regular camp season for 2 years. But this year that's going to change. We have a full slate of camp going, overnight camps, going week-long camps, and we're excited about it. In order to be ready for camp and to make it possible, however, we need help. And we need your help. There's a lot of things that we're facing right now. We assign each church projects, but outside of that, there's more things to do. Just this week, it's been a long week, I'll tell you. Just this week, our big finish mower that we bought not too long ago broke down, and I'm waiting for a part to come in. And then Mel Roth was out mowing for me Thursday night, and he broke our Kubota. The tie rod end broke on that. We're getting ready for a group to come in yesterday to clean the pool, and I go to turn the water on at the pool house this week, and a burst pipe, right? So I was like, okay, we'll fix that next week. No big deal. I'll drag water from the kitchen over there. There's a spigot out there. Turn that on. Lorraine Roth is our office manager. She was out there yesterday helping me organize the groups. We had 6 groups out there. And she goes, Matt, there's water on the floor in the kitchen. Another burst pipe. And so we had to get water from one of the cabins instead. So there's a lot of things going on. That was all just this week, like Tuesday through yesterday. But we're going to get there, no doubt about it. And we have great people in our churches that are stepping up to help out in numerous ways. And we're asking our church to come together once again to help make LaMoine possible. And then I asked, how might you serve at LaMoine? I know LJ's looking for help. All of our weeks are looking for help. How might you serve this summer? See, I believe that summer camp is a great way to introduce the youth of your community, our community, to Christ, and to help those who might already know who Jesus is to grow in their faith. There's a book by a man named Gary Thomas called Sacred Pathways. In it, he outlines 9 pathways or 9 ways that individuals connect with Jesus, or connect with God. If you're a reader, I encourage you to pick up the book. We're not going to go through those 9 ways. We don't have the time to do that. But as I was reflecting and as I've thought about that, I see each of those 9 ways out at camp that people can connect with God. No matter who you are, no matter what your personality is, no matter what you like to do, no matter how God created you, there is a way for you to connect with God out at summer camp. No matter what's going on, camp is a great place for people to grow, for kids to grow in their faith, and for adults to be challenged to love and serve Him as well. As I stop and I think about the rich history of LaMoine, I can't help but wonder if Melvin Fiskus even knew or understood where his idea for a youth camp at a small park in Camp Point would lead. If he knew the lives that would be impacted and the thousands of kids that would come through the camp, all because he saw potential and a need. And after thoughtfully and prayerfully considering it, he acted. The kingdom has been profoundly impacted and grown through the ministry of LaMoine. People that have gone to LaMoine have gone on to become Bible college professors, preachers, ministry leaders. I know one guy who, while sitting in the back of chapel at a Niners week of camp while he was a SAW director, decided he was going to go into ministry and went to Ozark that summer. He now leads a men's ministry that reaches across the globe. All because he spent some time at LaMoine. And some of you, your lives have been deeply impacted because of the time that you spent at LaMoine. I wonder if Melvin Fiskus even knew the impact that he would have. Well, how about you? The question is, what is God asking you to do? Where is He asking you to step out in faith so that He can do far more than you or I could ever think or imagine? See, LaMoine exists because one man followed God. What could exist because of your obedience? I just want to thank you so much for allowing me to be here, for continuing to support the camp, and not only the camp, my family, in this time of transition as we're moving forward. But I just challenge you to think about that. What could exist if you step out in obedience? Will you pray with me?